Yeah. I'll react if I had to. Put some things in the past too, and don't let them distract you, but react if you have to. Yeah. I'll react if I had to. Put some things in the past too, and don't let them distract you, but react if you have to. Yeah. React if you have to. Yeah.
Don't know the time, yeah. Just know that I'm, one of a kind, What's on your mind, Well, hard to find, Beautiful mind, Still in my prime, Just know that I'm here.
What's up, guys? Pondoff's Anonymous, episode 33. Here we are. Jeff, how you doing?
We're here, man. I'm good. I've got family over right now. Little baby in the house, getting me ready for our baby boy. We found out we're having a baby boy.
Yeah. I fucking called it.
You did call it, man. So yeah, we're gonna have a little baby boy running around. Yeah.
He's got that little cannoli.
They showed it to us on the thing, but I did not see it. I just took their word for it. So I cannot see anything on those ultrasounds.
You got a little pecker, so you know, probably just kidding.
Looked like me.
Oh man, well congratulations. That's
Thank you.
exciting. We'll get him on the ice in no time.
All right, you can be his coach.
Speaking of getting on the ice, I'm fucking thrilled today. I really am. We have a guest, an old friend who's seen both shades of Chris Pondoff, if you will, and has always been a mentor to me. And Chaz, was your number 33? 33 is a goaltender's sweater.
Patrick Waugh, man.
Yeah, and here you are on 33.
Yeah,
so Chaz Franke is our guy today, our guest, and for a variety of reasons. He's like a brother to me, and a big brother in the terms of he's had to get me out of some trouble and would often come down pretty hard on me, probably harder than my old man would at times. But also Chaz is definitely in the industry, if you want to call it that, with his career path, and he's always been, even before I think you started getting paid to do what you do, Chaz. You've always been of the social worker ilk, if you will. So we're definitely going to get into how you're changing the world, man, and shortly. But
look
first,
at that ink.
Yeah, man, it's fucking hot.
There's plenty of it.
A
little bit at a time.
That was a post hockey career artwork, because that was later in college, I think, when you started, and then you got hooked. Yeah,
I had a rule: I wouldn't get any tattoos until I had money, because I didn't want to put anything on prime real estate just because I could afford it. And so once I was making a living, I said, okay, we can get started and let's get going. And it's been going ever since, and I love it. Same person's done pretty much all the same work. Her name's Amanda Pepper. She's in St. Louis, and
so all right.
Yeah, well, she's the
you
best.
do often see people, and this isn't a judgment, to each their own, but they have I would say thousands of dollars worth of tattoos, but you wonder if that money could have been more responsibly spent. But
I've got a buddy. He's got a chess piece, and it's like lyrics to a song, but he got them when he was drunk, and they're the wrong lyrics.
God bless him.
God love him.
Yeah. They look cool, but nobody knows the song, so he's
sober.
You might want to send him this podcast. I'm surprised I didn't do something like that.
You know him.
In my day.
It's Brando. It's Brando.
That's fucking beautiful. We're going to have to get him on one day.
Yeah.
So, Chaz, man, thanks for being here. This is exciting. I think you were always one that probably knew. Well, you tried to right my ship a couple times, and I would always listen or hear. I don't know how that saying goes.
Yeah, don't worry about that. It didn't land.
Oh, right. But A for effort, brother, and I finally got to a place where I'm work in progress, but I cleaned up my act a little bit, as you can probably attest to. But I just want to start with how, how you and I met, and hear your perspective on where some things were maybe we're going sideways with me, and then we'll laugh a little bit, but we'll get to it. And then where I want to get to is with what you're doing now, and what you've seen. Pick your brain on your expertise on trauma and addiction, and how connected they can be, and how the mental health game is. I see movement and progress in the arena, but I think it's still lacking, and there's still the stigma. But I'd like to talk a little bit about that today, and want to hear about your new venture. So I'm really excited to learn about it too, because when I saw it, I just beamed up with excitement, and I already have a vision of a drop in the bucket of the people it's going to help, because it's going to help, I think, way more people than you can even imagine.
It's the hope.
So congratulations on that, and we'll get to that. But the good old ice rink, huh, Chaz?
It's still there.
It's a graveyard, right?
Yeah, 100%.
There's maybe a good thing, because there's a lot of things that happen in that building that are probably best left. And
we should have. I love the fact that we all had that job, and we sat around complaining about working in an ice rink and how terrible the ice rink was, and how awful they treated us, and how the owner didn't care, and he was never around. And then you think back and go, they should have fired us every day we worked. We did a fireable offense every single shift, and I was the manager. I was. I had a different color T-shirt than everybody else, which hinted at wonderful symbolic leadership presence. And instead, it's just like, somebody saying, "Hey, we need a fresh keg tapped, and Westhoff's throwing watermelons off the roof." And I'm just like, well, those two things will take care of themselves. I'm going to stay up here, sharpen a pair of skates, and then we wonder why it sank into the ground.
Yeah, well, it's funny you bring that up, because just before we came on, I started thinking about how many times 16, 17, maybe 18, and years of age that I drove that Zamboni shit-faced.
Sure.
On the clock doing an ice make. And that's probably frowned upon in most LLCs. Or S-Corps, I would think.
Yeah, I would be scared of a similar action as a business owner currently, yeah.
Right, yeah, exactly. Jeff, we had, you never probably went into that, not to the ice rink at Fairy Heights.
No, it was, by the time I would have had a chance to, it was already condemned or shut down or whatever, because mine subsidence here in the Metro East, you got to love it.
Who knew?
Yeah.
Right. I wouldn't. That might have been something to vet before.
See, I spent a lot of time in the East Alton ice rink, so that's not any better, probably.
Beautiful this time of year.
Yeah.
I've told I told Jeff I've been thrown out of East Alton ice rink probably more times than he's been in East Alton ice rink.
For sure.
It's that Granite City Cahokia thing, man. It still runs deep. I still chirp Tyler Solberger and Bobby Meseros on Facebook as much as I fucking can.
Well, I met you when you were 14.
Yeah.
I'm right. A couple years older, and so I was working there as my first job at 16, and you were 14, and so I would have already seen some of your earliest unprovoked fistfights.
Unprovoked.
You always had a good story, though. You could always walk me through exactly why it was somebody else's fault that you had to beat the shit out of them.
This is great. I know a different Pondoff than you guys know.
Chaz, it's funny you say that, because when I started really, when that slope started getting steeper on the way to rock bottom, I became even better at being able to make it somebody else's or everybody else's fault. So I mean, you become a master in that game, in the worlds of addiction and alcoholism. There's no doubt. I do remember. I think it was I was 14 when we came over to watch a game at your house, and there was the Chaz always had a strict no alcohol policy, and I must have missed that memo because I smuggled a couple pints of I think it was peppermint schnapps in, and then it didn't take. I thought I was pretty smart and going to be able to get that past Chaz, but it didn't take too long for him to.
Well, he comes into my place now where I lived at, and this is high school, where I lived at. I lived in a duplex, and I just had the basement of the duplex. You'd come in through the garage, and so there were always a lot of people coming and going, but I didn't want to lose privileges because I like just hanging out with people. So we didn't drink there. People didn't get high there, nothing like that. It was always just hanging out. And people knew that, and the only person that was really going to blatantly disrespect it was Pondoff. And so he comes in with basically his arms around a 5-gallon bucket that's about 3 cubes of ice, a few gallons of booze, and then like a little bit of soda to trick me into thinking that he just loves Diet Coke. And I'm like, get that shit out of here. And he's like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, well, we'll get you another one. I'll dump this one in the toilet, and we'll get you another soda from the fridge down there in the laundry room. And then I just see what it looks like to see a rattle from a baby, take a rattle from a baby. Right? Like he just loses his mind because he's 14, 15 years old, and the reality is I'm about to pour $50 worth of liquor down the toilet, and it was about 8 hours of man hour to get it. To get it. He's working his ass off to get that booze, and so he was in his feelings that day.
Yeah, I think I got thrown in the. At one point, you got so pissed off at my tantrum, you threw me in the bathtub, shut the curtain, walked out, and shut the door, and don't come out until you grow up.
There's a little timeout.
Yeah. There's that's when it started. I'll say. I mean, and that was when it was just fun in high school. But that ice rink did turn into. I still think it, and I may be the one to write it. I think it could be a setting for a pretty cheesy but make money in advertisement fucking series like Dawson's Creek that me and my wife are binging right now.
Oh, good for you.
I mean, there's a lot of underage drinking, quite a bit of underage. Well, I don't want to say underage and the S word together, but teenagers having sex in that facility on the Zamboni, not mentioning any names.
No.
I think you need to get Seth Rogen involved in that one. I think that's right up his alley, hockey. And
I mean, and then there was the whole playing hockey thing, and some of the best parts about working there was when you'd get in a fight and you'd get thrown out of the game, you'd go take a quick shower and then put on your employee shirt and then walk out and start working and be like, wait, what you did? I mean, you can't do anything about it, I guess. I mean, Chaz had his own fish to fry when he was running the pro shop, and merchandise for some reason would always walk out the back door. It grew legs, I think.
Inventory was not fun.
I can hear you calling one of my counterparts and colleagues on the ice through life on probably a bigger shit disturber than I've been, and calling him and saying, "Hey, we're missing a pair of Bauer 5000s." I mean, I understand when I'm short a couple rolls of sock tape, but we're gonna need you to locate maybe some 5000s and.
It's the most expensive item that we have in the shop, so thanks for being subtle.
And then I would always, for some reason, coax Chaz to hiring either the girls that I liked or my girlfriend, and that was a great fucking idea, getting them chops at the ice rink and brought a bunch of fucking horny ass hockey players, right?
Yeah, I felt so protective of anybody that you brought into your shitstorm. And of course, like, I'll be the first one to admit, I mean, we're talking about being 18, 19 years old. So I'm also unqualified to be protective of anyone's shitstorm. I can't handle my own shitstorm. I'm 18 years old. But the thing is, I mean, yes, you would bring a tornado of energy into the circumstance. And it would inevitably include some kind of, Chazzy, I might have fucked this one up. And it's like, yeah, we know. Thanks for joining the party. But the reality is, and I think about you, and I think about your dad, and the people that we all knew together. But the one thing that I can vouch for, if you think of all the people that we're mentioning, so maybe the people that were that stayed in my orbit, so people like Hags and McKinney and them. The one thing we can say for sure, though, is like all of us had a big part of our heart for you. I mean, we all loved you. We all still do love you. And that was one of those things that when, even though you were scrappy and talking shit and causing trouble, there was a lot of times where you had such a wonderful ability to absorb it, though, too. Like you and I have told the story a million times of Al McInnes kicking the door open, into the hallway screaming about how bad of a ref your dad is. And, there's a version of you that somebody in the crowd could have said that it was a bad call and you would have thrown him down a flight of stairs. And then there's a version of you that's Al McInnes can say that was a bad call. And you're just like, this is amazing. Al McInnes just said my dad sucks. Right?
He handled that pretty well too.
You always told that line in a way that I think all of us were very well aware that we just, we love you and we're gonna take care of you as best we can, but you weren't gonna lead anything too far astray for us, anyways. The only person that you were gonna beat the shit out of a lot of times was yourself, And
yeah,
we didn't want that in the long run, but it was a risk I was willing to take.
Yeah. I took that trip out to Swansea or Freeburg or wherever the fuck that was alcohol induced and turned into quite the night. I did well in that scrap until the state trooper got a hold of me, and then I think I still got my I think I still have teeth damage from that fucking guy.
I don't know what the statute of limitations is on a backyard fist fight, but
yeah. So I've had my ass kicked by a police officer or two, but all my fault. I will say that 100%. When we started going to college, believe it or not. Well, first off, let me go back to that McKinnis story, Jeff. I need to clarify something with you, brother. That was a fucking scrimmage game. It wasn't
right.
And it was an offsides call that Al thought Tom missed. So,
and that's that much.
Tom said to Al, he said, "Hey, settle down, Al, baby. You're gonna make the fucking team, brother." So, Chaz, you were when I would randomly walk when we got out of college and started working. I think we were out of college at the time. Yeah, I was home from Champaign, and you're 3 or 4 years older than me, so you're out doing your thing. And I would make my way. We lived close enough to each other to where I could walk over like a good neighbor.
Yeah. Oh, it was something.
And say hello. Usually to watch a hockey game or just to show up on a Tuesday night at 10:30 or something.
Yeah, to lay down in my living room floor, try to give booze to my dog.
Well, now, Jeff, I remember the next morning after the first time I went to Chaz's, I said, "Hey, Chaz, was I really that drunk, or do you have a 3-legged dog?" And he happened to have a 3-legged dog.
He's in the room with me too.
Is he really?
Yeah.
Oh my God! Tell him I said hi, Diego. Right?
Yeah, Diego made it. He's still around.
Wow, that's awesome.
He probably. I did try to give him, I think, a couple cocktails, and I said to Chaz and who he was living with at the time, I said, "Hey, if I had 3 legs, I'd take a fucking drink,"
That's Sounds about right.
Didn't I pull the ultimate Uncle Buck though that trip over and you told me that you lived in the White House on
Yeah, you scared I had to give flowers to my neighbor.
Apparently I showed up, Jeff, and I was banging on this guy's door like, Chaz, let me the fuck in. What? Wrong house.
Yeah, and it was and the only reason that story would have been a drop in the bucket, except my neighbor across the street, who was accosted in this scenario, they weren't home, and their daughter was like house sitting. So he was like just inside checking on the house, and somebody just starts banging on the door and yelling, and so she calls the police.
Of course.
As anyone would guide her to do.
Yeah.
And so the next day I brought some flowers over to the actual residents of the home, and they were very receptive of the story, which is in its own way how I do think this is one of the reasons why you were always so deserving of being a lovable figure is God bless you, a lot of those stories end that way. Like they do end with, here's a bouquet of flowers, and I hope nobody's got any PTSD. And people saying, yeah, no, we're good. Thanks. It's, it's all right. It's a fun story for all of us. And I'm like, well, in the long run, it's not going to be a fun story for him, but the rest of us.
Well, you saw it coming. Yeah. And as much fun, I mean, there's nobody I'd rather, and maybe not today because of, I'm still not over it, but to talk hockey with. It's not that the way we're playing right now as far as the Blues are concerned and what happened last night in overtime, but I don't know if you get online or not, Chaz, but people are already shitting on fucking Bennington. Like,
oh, yeah, he's done as far as I'm concerned.
It's unfucking believable. This guy, what he just did for us, and they're already after 2 fucking hockey games. And when Bo Horvat's on a fucking breakaway, it's not a soft goal. I don't care. And the book on Bennington is go 5-hole on him if you want a shot. And
yeah.
So the guy did it. He's a world-class goal scorer, and now we want to trade him.
He's a finisher, yeah. And then,
oh man, but Chaz was a goaltender in his day, Jeff, and goaltenders, I've often said, are either the nicest human being you'll ever meet, or they're borderline sociopathic, and I don't think there's an in between.
There's a lot of good, kind of stoic, thoughtful goaltenders out there, and then there's Ed Belfour.
Exactly. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Who
and,
I think got arrested while intoxicated and bribed the police by saying he would give them $1 billion.
$1 billion.
So,
you got to aim high.
Sounds good. We'll let him go.
Yep.
You got to aim high. I
would have been a terrible goaltender. I would just move every time somebody shot at me. I'd be like, go ahead.
We gotta get out of here.
I had some goaltenders through the youth hockey that were of such, and they don't last very long. I will say, and this is and Kelly Chase said this on a podcast. I think I heard it on a local radio show, and it couldn't be more right that the sport of ice hockey, for the most part, there's always exceptions, right, has a way of reading out the assholes. Because I could get in a fight with anybody on the ice that was wearing the opposing sweater, but I'll, as soon as we get showered up, have a drink with the guy. And I did, though, that one time there was an Althoff Belleville East High School game, Chaz, and there was some fucking jack-offs in the score box, God bless their soul, running their mouth to me because I was a freshman. I had a target on my back, so I was on the, and I asked those guys to meet me outside, and I had no intention of fighting these guys in the parking lot. They were pretty big motherfuckers, but
I remember who you're talking about.
Yeah, Chaz was working. I think you had already graduated Althoff. I think. Or either that or you were playing, but after the game, before we left the locker room area, Chaz was able to find me and say, you might not want, those guys are actually waiting in the parking lot. They don't play, and I'm advising you not to pursue that. And so I had a police escort out the the back door, and it may have been my first police escort from a game, but not my last. These fuckers can't take a joke, Yeah. What their fucking problem is.
Who knew you were so funny?
So Chaz, let's get to your heart, man. I not trying to fucking sound all foo-foo here, but
I can handle that.
What led you down the road of social work?
Well, for the longest time, I thought I had the real classic story of like a therapist and a social worker of, hey, I've always been the good friend or the trustworthy friend, or I always like to listen to people or help people. And I always had like a real classic story in my mind. But it was kind of later on in the game that I realized that some of it was, and this isn't a knock on like my family. My parents are great, loving people. But like, I was a kid growing up that nobody saw and nobody heard. Like nobody really checked on me, asked about me, that kind of thing. And so I kind of grew into being as we say in my world, I became the adult I needed when I was a kid. I eventually grew into being a social worker that just wants to see and hear and listen and create a safe space because there's a lot of aspects of that were kind of denied me coming up. And so that became the story that I realized through my own work. I mean, any of us that are in my field as social workers and therapists, most of us have done a lot of our own work in therapy. And that was kind of what brought me to it. And so I feel very fortunate that I had that I stumbled into that I became a therapist. I knew I wanted to be a therapist when I got into college. I spent one semester as a communications major in SIUE thinking that I was going to call hockey games for a living. I even took French in high school just in case I had to go and call some games in French, which would have been a real dumpster fire because I was not that good at French. I did take 4 years of it.
I can just hear you in the queue. The Quebec Junior Major Hockey League calling, Vinny LeCavy.
In some kind of franglais language of just like, he shoots and a score! And like, I just put an accent on English words is all probably.
That would be great.
But yeah, I knew I wanted to be a therapist. I started as a psych major at 18. I jumped right in knowing that I'd go to grad school, do what I had to do. And then I went and got my master's in social work at St. Louis University and my clinical license and, was off to the races. But it took a little while to realize that the short version of an important story is I just grew into the adult that I needed when I was a kid.
Now, I wrote that quote down.
Yeah, that's great.
When you said that, because immediately when you said that, some light bulbs started going off like, ooh, I know that person that I can resonate with. That quote's they'll be like, oh shit, yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, and I know in my life, Chaz was always that guy to go to with the hard shit. With like he said, I mean, I would, whether it was a fight or struggling with, when my parents split up or, the real life shit, the heavy shit, Chaz was the guy. And you'd almost have to call him ahead of time and schedule a fucking appointment because he was that forever. All of our whole group surrounded around that ice rink. And he was very protective of all of us. And I think is still friends with a lot of us still and pretty close. I mean, that's how we've always kind of looked up to Chaz. So when I did have a friend growing up as a child that he was obsessed with becoming a cop and played with cop, like he always wanted to be the cop. I always wanted to be the fucking bad guy, obviously. and the kid like is now, he didn't become a police officer per se, but he is running like a 911 center, and he was always he wanted to be an EMT. So when Chaz decided to choose this career path, it wasn't a surprise, just like it wasn't a surprise with that other kid. And some people you're like, that he's going to be that when he grows up, you know, and it comes to fruition. And I will admit, shamefully, that I didn't know, or unfortunately, I cared because I had a friend that did it, but you didn't really connect the dots on what the fuck a social worker was back when I was living the lifestyle I was living. And my apologies for that, but I've gotten a fast, course in it because I fucking married one. And I think before we came on, you introduced me to your new girlfriend, and wonderful girl named Holly, right? And she's a social worker. So I said, "Oh, you're, one of the underpaid doing the most important work out there." And I think that's a pretty true statement for most social workers out there.
That's where it's at, man. The teachers and the social workers, most underpaid, doing the most important stuff.
Mm-hmm. Well, the good news is the Republicans want to give so much money to social workers and build, right? Is that accurate?
Great. It's the last 4 years. It's just been pouring in. Like, just had no idea.
You're like blowing your nose with hundos, right?
Yeah, finally got this 401k I always needed.
Without going too far down that rabbit hole, so Chaz, what out of college, what was your first gig in this?
My first big boy job was I was a counselor in a prison. I was a drug and alcohol counselor in Department of Corrections, which I learned an incredible amount, and also and I'll get into a little bit of my background here with some spirituality stuff too, if you don't mind. But
please,
it doesn't fall on me. It doesn't fall on deaf ears that I had no business being a drug and alcohol counselor in a prison. I've never had a drink. I was 23 going on 24 years old, and just got a job because, once again, it was social work and they paid nothing. And I walked in and interviewed. I interviewed all ready to go with all my theory and everything. And I'm walking out with the assistant director of the program. And I said, "I hope to hear from you guys." And he goes, "You think I'm not going to hire you? How many people do you think we interview?" So I worked there for a bit, but I did realize in a similar time frame that I had the early makings of some real internal hubris, that I was too I started drinking my own Kool-Aid, because the reality is, as a kid that grew up overweight and picked on with no self-confidence and no sense of self, I was not ready to be good at something. I was not, so I was getting credit as a counselor. I'm putting together programs. I'm working with senior counselors. I was good at it. I enjoyed it. I loved it. And I wasn't good at being good at something. And so I kind of just leaned too far into my own process and believe in my own crap. And thankfully, that's about the time I found Buddhism. That's when I started practicing Zen, which now I practice some different forms of Buddhism. But Zen was what cut me off at the knees, the same way that, you had to be cut off at the knees at a certain point. Like, I needed something to say, you are not this goddamn important. You need to stop believing your own bullshit and realize there's a lot of stuff bigger than you that you don't know a damn thing about. And that saved my ass. And that was right at that first big boy job. That was sitting there with a bunch of, we call them inmates, they're people. But sitting there with a bunch of people going, oh my God, these are my guys too.
Amen.
There's nobody different in this building. I got a different badge. I got a different ID than everybody else. But I'm sitting around talking about the new episode of Rescue Me with a table full of guys that, they're locked up and I'm not, but we're the same people. And that first job really saved me. I also learned an incredible amount about methamphetamine in that first job.
Yeah, man.
That was what I was specializing in at the time, was treating meth. We had a meth unit at that prison.
It's fucking gone off like wildfire, man. And what it does to people, and you when people are in jail or prison for meth, they are sober from meth for the most part, right?
Oh yeah. Where I was, I mean, people talk a lot about how there's drugs all over prisons, which I'm not an expert on speaking on, I'll take their word for it. But where I was, because it was a treatment place, everybody was short. Everybody didn't have that much time on their sentence, and they weren't there an incredibly long time, and it was minimum security in that, you know, a guy, you didn't have a lot of fights, you didn't have a lot of brawls, you didn't have a lot of, like, maybe the dangerous stuff. It was a drug treatment facility. That's it.
It wasn't like Oz on HBO.
Yeah. No, nobody like wheeling around telling a story about who's going to get stabbed the next day.
Yeah. It's a great show. A lot of never mind. But yeah, anyway. So, but the reason I bring that up about meth is that you know, there's some pretty good documentaries out there that are just following meth addicts, and eventually you either end up dead or in prison. There's just that's it. Those are your two destinations. And I say dead, we're all going to get to that point, but a very early death, and I mean almost as you die, almost as a skeleton, and just that's all that's left. And I mean that literally and figuratively, because by that time I think bridges have been so burned with relationships that you really die pretty much. Unfortunately, it's alone and bare-boned. But on these documentaries, the inmates that are in for meth-related offenses, mostly using, right, are sober, and they're brokenhearted of what it's done to them. They're able to recognize what the drug has done to them. And there are long-term, even more so than heroin users and alcoholics like myself, meth fucks you up long-term. Even when you become sober, it's still a better life, right? But you have lasting paranoia. Am I right about that? And
yeah.
And they used to say, you know, the meth bugs. When people are using meth, they start feeling like insects are crawling through their skin, so they just destroy their fucking flesh trying to get them out. I don't think those carry over as much, but there's definitely remnants of that. So there's scars, there's meth mouth, all that stuff. But I love what you said, is they are people. There's no question about it, and we better get our hands around this shit. Because it's funny. Nothing's funny about it, but when human beings, it was easy to discard it, and maybe it still is today, as all that junkie. Mm-hmm. And then I've seen far too often people that think like that. Next thing you know, it hits right in their fucking household, and now that junkie becomes their son, their sister, their brother. And that's it's not those people over there or those people under the bridge are addicted to this shit. It's, you better watch your kid. It's happening to adults that are already with families. It's spread its grip into people's houses now. So the sooner that people recognize it and fuck that stigma and say these human beings need help, the more you'll learn about it, and the more you'll realize, I think, be able to make sure it doesn't happen to your loved one.
Yeah. Well, you know, pain doesn't play any favorites. You know, I mean, everybody suffers, and that's kind of the shift. And you know, there's a quote a couple of people, but there's a guy named Stephen Diamond. He used to write for Psychology Today. You know, he used to call addiction, he used to use the term a denial of reality, because he used to say so frequently, you know, you would hear people that would say, you know, I'm not hurting anybody. I'm just out here doing my own thing. I just have it, you know, like I don't bother anybody else. But that neglects the basic idea of like, yeah, but you know, you might be loved. You know, I mean, you know, Pondoff, I'm glad that you got cleaned up, because there wasn't going to be anything that was going to make me stop loving you. So I would have followed. You know, I would have followed down some dark places just in the name of trying to get you in a good spot. You know, and I'm smart enough to know I can't get you in a good spot.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I can't do it. Like it's not my job. But it's not like there would have been anything that would make me say no. Pondoff's dead as far as I'm concerned. That wouldn't have happened. I would have just kept taking whatever body shots I needed to take to keep you around.
And you're not talking about the tequila style body shots.
No, I've never had to mess with that. But the thing that comes up right away is, I don't know if either of you guys have heard of, there's a guy named, I'll spell it out. There's a guy named Gabor Mate, and it's GABORMATE, first name, last name. He wrote a book years ago called In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts. It's an addiction book. But he says his kind of famous quote is, we shouldn't ask why the addiction, we should ask why the pain.
Fuck, man.
And
that's good.
He talks a lot. So in Hungry Ghosts is a Buddhist reference, actually, and they use it as a metaphor for addiction because there's a bunch of levels. There's like the Tibetan Book of the Living and the Dead, which is kind of a famous thing. But the level above, depending on the symbolism that you read, the level above the hell realm in Buddhism. Now, Buddhism it's not meant to be mystical, so this isn't angels and harps or fire. It's just hell, very personal process. The level above the hell realm is the realm of hungry ghosts. And hungry ghosts have like a little mouth and a long neck and a big belly. So they can't get full. They're just always taking in and taking in and taking in, but they never fill up. And the thought is that what we do is a person will continue to cycle into the realm of hungry ghosts so they never fall into their own hell, which is your pain. And so addiction is considered the realm of hungry ghosts. I'll stay here where I'm feeding and feeding and feeding and feeding, but never satisfied, because if I stop that, I slide into this pain that I just don't want to feel. And the pain piece of it isn't like, oh, I'm avoidant or I can't handle it or I'm not strong enough. The pain is like, nobody's ever told me that it's okay to hurt. Nobody's ever told me that it's safe to hurt. Nobody's ever said, let's just make room for that. So I'm going to get out of it at any means possible. And that's the work of Gabor Mate looks at that. He was a doctor in Vancouver. Vancouver has a
fucking Canucks.
Right?
Sorry.
It was topical.
Still fresh.
They have historically have a part of town like most big cities, kind of what's maybe stereotypically called a bit of a skid row. And he was the medical director in a program there that was working with a lot of people that were struggling with addiction. And he just wrote this beautiful book about it. And he's written a bunch of books about the link between trauma and addiction, but The Realm of Hungry Ghosts is gold standard. It's just amazing.
I've said on this show, and I'm so bad at reading books. Like, I've had authors mail me their books because of the podcast, and I feel so fucking bad. Like, I get this guilt that I want to have this one author on the show, but I can't because I got to read his book first. Otherwise, I'll look like an asshole, and it'll be disrespectful. It's not that I literally can't read. I can read. But so what I do is I try to pawn these books off on Ashley and then say, "Hey, you got to give me the beef here."
Sure.
You don't really get it. I have read, like I said, I read that Mockingbird book. That was good stuff, right? And the movie didn't cover it as well. So I wrote it down. I'm going to try. And the portions that you're saying are just hitting me like a bolt of. That's how I said bolt of lightning. That's a funny inside joke, but they hit me. And there couldn't be anything that more true than those statements about pain and running from it, whether it's grief or trauma. I think they probably both fit here because a lot of grief is trauma. Yeah. I think, like I say, I'm not, qualified to make any of those statements, but I find my personal story and people I know that have lost children we've talked about on this show is probably the ultimate that I can think of grief scenario that you never want. But to each person, each grief is hard and different. But that running from that pain is, I ran so fast from the pain when my old man died. for 22 months, and my liver was done, and it still wasn't keeping me from drinking 2 bottles of whiskey a night and shooting Rumpelmans, because I did not want to feel Tom's death at all. And I ran almost to myself to a grave by running from that pain. So it really makes fucking sense to me, man. And I think it will to the listeners. I know it will to the, I think we're up to about eight listeners now, Chaz. But,
I know all of them.
So, right. I don't know. I'm having goosebumps on how much sense that makes. And how feeding that with that addiction to you never be satisfied, but something's blocking you from going to that hurt. Yeah. And I see it. And this is how I learn, right? I learn, and I'm always kind of 4 years behind. So I'm not a progressive, but I run into a situation. I'm like, oh, that's what fucking Jeff was talking about with the Black Lives Matter shit. I get it now, after it kind of hits you in the face. Or, oh, that's what fucking childhood trauma looks like now that I'm a foster parent. These people talking about it weren't full of fucking shit. And, I was kind of an asshole about it. So I'm working on that self-awareness thing, that realizing, like you said, cut it off the knees, that I don't know everything, and I've kind of shifted to where I'm an always learning guy. Try to be, but the trauma that I see in these kids, that I try to see, and then the thought that there's so many kids out there that don't ever get told that, like you were saying, and don't have the ability to be their own therapists. I'm thinking about kids that grow up in poverty and become the cycle of crime continues because there's anger and pain that is completely unfucking treated.
Yeah. Well,
I don't know. It's hit me, and as you talk about trauma, that's what all goes through my head, man.
Well, there's two big things that happen with trauma. And I won't get into like brain science stuff, because I think there's a lot of amateur brain scientists out there. And so if I started talking all about parts of the brain, you would quickly realize that I'm one of those amateur brain scientists. But, when a traumatic event happens, which, you have to understand, a lot of the trauma that we're talking about is chronic, right? Is a kid who was abused for years, or a person that's in a domestic violence situation for years, right? So it's every day. Right. And this doesn't take away from single incident, terrible car wreck, seeing something happen, witnessing violence, war, like things like that. But to talk about something that is home to this conversation. So like grief, loss, child abuse, things like that. There's 2 things that happen. Thing number 1 is the incident, the occurrence of what is happening, which is the threat to your life, the threat to your mind's ability to think it's going to survive this. And the other thing is the realization that you live in a world that let it happen, right? Now, I'm not saying it's anybody's fault. I mean, if you're abused, it's somebody's fault. It's the abuser's fault. But it's part 1 of this is happening, and it's part 2 of realizing that I live in a world that let it, right? So, like, when we're kids, that's particularly scrambling, because part 1, oh my gosh, I'm being locked inside for the weekend while mom and dad go on a weekend trip. I'm being hit. I'm being beat. I'm being neglected. I'm not being fed. I have a medical condition and my parents don't fill my medication for it. I have terrible asthma and I don't get my albuterol because my dad doesn't give a shit. These things happen and they take this incredible toll on, I might die. But as a child, we are we have a mind that thinks that everything is our fault anyways, right? Like, we're trying to figure out, like, what do I have to do so dad's not mean? What do I have to do so mom doesn't freak out? What do I have to do so I don't get abused? And we're organizing the world through that lens, right? We're trying to figure out what we have to do to slow it down, because we are rightfully so egomaniacs when we're children, right? Like, the world revolves around us when we're children. we're even told that for the first couple years of our lives, right? If you're in a safe world, you're told as a 2-year-old, oh my God, you're the most amazing thing on the planet. We're going to hang your garbage artwork on the lower part of the refrigerator, right? That's not going to work if the same drawing when I'm 19, they send me away. But when I'm 2, I'm Picasso. And so we handle things differently. But that idea that oh, that's right. I'm in a world now that's unsafe. And when we're children, we're supposed to be promised that we're in a safe world. And we're supposed to be promised that if something goes wrong, it's going to be handled. Right? As a child, if you fall down and break your arm, it's terrible that you broke your arm, but you're supposed to be in a world that says, okay, let's go to the ER, let's get you a cast, let's have everybody sign it, let's make sure that you got help at school because that's the hand you write with. And those are the things that let you heal from the fact that something bad just happened. But if something bad happens and nobody intervenes and nobody cares, it feels like your suffering is going to bleed out into everything. So then you think you live in a world that can just let things happen. So you never feel safe and you never feel trust and you never feel attachment and safety. And let's say something comes along like alcohol or opiates, because that's pretty topical, of course. Opiates come along and all of a sudden for the first time ever you go,
yeah,
everything just slows down. And this is still some of the work of Gabor Mate, but, when you interview somebody or you talk to somebody who's addicted to opiates, it's very common to hear them describe heroin or oxy or whatever as a soft, warm hug, or it feels like somebody putting a warm blanket over my shoulders. And that's not an accident. That stuff interacts with your brain in a very similar way to the same things that get released when you have a safe connection with your mother. Right? When you make eye contact with your mom who sees you and you see her, and you don't know you're separate from that person when you're born. Right? Those moments are actually filling you with the similar kind of endorphin as what happens when you get with opiates. Right? Opiates are utilizing our natural painkillers in our system. And so it literally isn't an accident that an addict might say it feels like a soft, warm hug, because for the first time in their life, they're getting one. So no wonder they love that substance. And then you tell them they got to quit it because it's going to kill them. They got to grieve it then. If you're going to tell, Pondoff, to get you to stop drinking, you had to grieve alcohol. And alcohol wasn't just, oh my God, you love drinking. Alcohol was also a connection to your dad a bit too. You guys knew how to get after it.
Yeah. Amen.
And there wasn't a better guy on the planet than Tommy Pondoff. I know that. We all love Tom. But that comes in and it just takes that one little bit of oh my God, this is what it's supposed to feel like. Right? And then by the time you can't stop it, everybody calls you a junkie and a fuck up and a loser. And you're just not. You just want somebody to love you and nobody ever has.
Jeez. Yep. Man, I got goosebumps. I'm sad. I'm grateful. All that shit, man. Hearing you talk is. I just am so grateful for that perspective, because people need to hear that shit so bad. I needed to hear it today.
Do you know this in my world? This is pretty common language, but have you guys ever heard of the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study? They call it the ACEs.
It's ringing a bell, but
it's around. It's kind of, but basically what it is it was research that was done to look at if you tally up the amount of adverse childhood experiences that somebody's been through, to then see how that relates to other illnesses, right? And what they found out was that the higher the ACE score is what you call it, the higher the ACE score, almost every single health concern is higher. Now, there's other correlative factors, right? Because the game changer in our country specifically is poverty. Poverty puts you at a higher risk for every health concern, every violent concern, every loss, grief, addiction, everything. Poverty it just blows a crater in the statistics. But with the ACE stuff, there was certain things like, and I don't have the statistic in front of me, so I hope I don't misquote it, but I believe that a person that had 4 or more ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, so these are things like death of a parent, incarceration of a parent, abuse, loss, violence, anything you think of, there's a whole checklist. A person that had 4 or more adverse childhood experiences, I believe, was 12 times more likely to be an IV drug user than somebody with, I think, 0. So there's not a lot of people with 0, let's say. But to think of that number, if you could think of anything that creates a 1,200% increase for an illness, right? Like we would stop the presses for any other thing. If you were 1,200% more likely to drop dead from a heart attack because you eat X, Y, and Z food, we would burn that to the ground. But instead, we say that a kid who suffers mightily is 1,200% more likely to be an IV drug user, and we say, what a fucking junkie.
Yeah. Mm.
I mean, it's just a wild thing. Like the reality is, like the higher level of human suffering that we have, the more exposed we are to anything from diabetes to heart conditions to drug addiction. Nadine Burke Harris is a woman who is now the Surgeon General in California, and she has implemented ACE checklists in all medical facilities. So now when you get admitted in the ER, you're going to do a checklist so that they're going to know going back there that you just had a heart attack, but you also have an ACE score of 5. You know, you've had a tough life.
Wow.
So no wonder your ticker's given out.
Oh, shit. Yeah, I would be certain that Ash knows about that test.
Sure.
I'm fully invested now. That's the way he put it that way, and I had not heard of it, and if I had, it was because I wasn't paying a fucking attention, and my foster parent training class that sometimes get a little long in the tooth, or when they start doing and it's bad of me to run from it, but they start talking about the fucking sex shit. You have a tendency to want to bail ASAP,
Sure.
But those kids don't. There's a reason why, and that's. Although I did learn in STARS class that sexual abuse is not it's not the worst out of like the 4. It's neglect, because there's some warped. And Chaz, you can correct me if I'm wrong. There's some warped feeling of connection. When a child's being fucking abused like that, where then there's neglect, there's nobody loves me at all. But so Chaz, and what I love about you is you identify all this, but you're also doing something to try to help and try to fix it. So you went from the prison, and then you were in the social working field for how many years?
I worked in community mental health for 13 years after that.
Wow.
As a therapist there. And I did some work in the community too. I did some case management for a little while before moving to therapy full time again. But all told, probably looking at about 15 years experience as a therapist. Nice. So just thousands of hours of one-on-one conversation.
And you've done some speaking engagements as well, right? Yeah,
I train. Current climate has changed that a little bit. I'm doing Zoom trainings and stuff, but yeah, my areas of specialization in terms of treatment have been trauma, and specifically sexual trauma has been an area of specialization for me. So I train a lot, just all over, different conferences, different populations. I train on a lot of secondary trauma too, on the stuff that affects the people that are doing the treatment. Because a lot of those workers are just kind of exposed, and a lot of the leadership, and this isn't the leadership's fault necessarily, but a lot of the leadership is focused on the administrative stuff. We got to get productivity up, we got to get billing up and things like that. And so you wouldn't necessarily know if you have a clinician that's being kind of traumatized by these big, heavy stories. So I've trained on a lot of that stuff, and I've taught. I mean, I taught in the psychology department at McKendree for a while before getting brought on at the MSW program at SLU, and then I teach it at SLU now. I teach at St. Louis University now. But
man, McKendree had a good hockey program there for a little bit, didn't they? But
yeah, not while I was there.
Yeah. That secondary trauma, right before you said that, I was thinking about how you had said you specialized or did a lot of work in the sexual trauma field, if you will, that when you go, unfortunately I've had some experience in a pediatric oncology unit. When you think of who the fuck can do that job, I thank God every day that there's the most amazing people in the world that can. But that's the same. That's what it connected when you said that you work in that field, because you're really throwing yourselves into. I mean, into the fucking fire, man. 99% of the people would have such a hard time dealing with that in a productive way to help the patient, if you will.
Yeah.
And you can do that. And I was thinking, man, that's fucking heroic and brave. And then you brought up the secondary trauma, which I didn't even know was a thing. But it makes complete fucking sense, man. To hear all that, since I've started this podcast, have been people have reached out and I don't have that fatigue right now yet, but Ashley was always warning me, you got to be careful, because I have absorbed a lot of stories, and they're all the addiction of the and why we're where we're at, and have had some conversations that are, like you put it, like as heavy as they get, you know, maybe not to your extent as a professional, but I feel fatigued a little bit at the end of some of the conversations, and I feel that how the fuck am I going to be able to help this person, or that I'm not qualified for this, and my first thing is to give them a reference to the Chaz of the world, places for people, hospitals, fucking for voluntary. Because I've learned now that you can't, people can't be involuntarily committed to a mental institution. I don't anymore. That's not a thing.
It's tough, yeah.
Yeah, but which is so hard because there's some people that are suffering from a real serious delusion, and try to tell them it's not a delusion, and you might get punched in the face. I mean, it's their reality. Right. You almost have to play into it. But so with that being said, I've learned a lot just in this, and you've helped me a lot, and I hope I don't get a fucking invoice from you, because if I do, I'll give you the wrong address. But
yeah, I wouldn't expect anything out of it.
Yeah, right. So you're able to invoice now because you started tell me about your venture, your latest venture. I'm really, really excited to hear about this.
So I last year bought a building in downtown Belleville, which is an old historic building. I love it. It's beautiful, an old brick building, but it was initiated by the thought of having a space that kind of spoke for itself. Like, the therapists out there in the world, your wife is an example too, are just so good at creating a space. Like you could sit in a broom closet with 2 folding chairs with a good therapist and still leave there thinking, man, that's what I needed. And we wanted a space that reflected that. We wanted these buildings that maybe in your mind's eye, it's how you think of a good, safe therapist's office, but most of us therapists just don't have access to that. We're in the hallway and across the hall is a dermatologist, and then here's a therapist's office, and that's fine. I mean, it is what it is. It's a healthcare profession, so it's not all bad. But I purchased this old building and spruced it up and found some real like-minded people to create kind of a larger vision of what we wanted therapy to look like. with us. And because in my mind and the kind of therapy that I practice, it's very much so more of a rite of passage. Like you should be able to look at therapy as your right to sit there with a neutral, safe presence who is exactly what they say they are, and to talk through some of the shit that makes this not easy for us. And to not look at it as, oh my God, I'm having all these problems, but to look at it as I deserve to process and feel and explore without thinking that I have to be considered, in a bad spot because of it. And so we called it Light Source is the name of the practice.
Love that name. I love that fucking name. I
cool.
looked on your website. It's really cool.
I appreciate that. I started talking to Amanda, my tattoo artist, and I was thinking about names, and the image that kept coming up was more like that lamp that gives you just enough light to read or see the path right in front of you. I'm not somebody that always thinks that you can have a big aha, I see everything, sudden enlightenment moment. Even my history in Buddhism comes from the idea of you got to do this every day. You gotta look, check on yourself, check on your view of reality, check on what you're clinging to and holding to every day. And so we wanted something that reflected the idea of just being able to illuminate the path in front of you, right? Because when we're struggling, even with addiction and with trauma, you can't see shit, you can't, and it's not your fault. You just can't see it. It's not clear. And, and so we were just thinking about what do you need in the dark was the question that came up. And the answer was we just need a light source. That's it. You don't need a floodlight. You don't need an answer. You just need a light source. You just need enough so that you can read what's on the page.
It's awesome.
Yeah. I love the name. You're downtown Belleville, not far from Fridays.
From your stomping grounds.
Right.
Yeah. Where are you in downtown Belleville?
So we're on East Lincoln.
Okay.
Which, if you're familiar, anybody listening familiar with Belleville, there's a YMCA at 159 in Lincoln, and so we're down on East Lincoln from there at 114.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's a great old building, and I bought it from this guy who was just incredible, who'd owned it for close to 40 years. And he worked upstairs. There was a lawyer's office was the main level, and then upstairs was this guy's lab, this dental lab, where he made different teeth and everything like that for people. Wow. And when I talked to him about it, because the building was just great already, it had new ductwork and it's beautiful and it's all new paint and everything. And he said, God, I love this building so much, and I knew if I didn't sell it, I'd never retire. So we're gonna give you a deal on it so that I can finally let myself start working. And so got in there, and a long-term coworker and friend of mine named Jessica Munton came with me, and she's very like-minded. She's been my kind of ride or die for a long time. And then a woman named Kim Thomas and her certified therapy dog Mila. Hopped on, and then we're going to have a woman named Kayla Anderson and a woman named Rachel Hudson that will be starting there soon. And these are all just tough as nails, loving people that just know how to handle it. They just know how to get in there with you and help you feel like it's okay to feel whatever you got to feel. That no matter how big the feeling is, it's not going to consume it. We got a beautiful space for it, so let's look at it.
That's awesome. I'll drive by there later and see where it is.
Awesome. Yeah, we got the sign up. Looking good.
Good.
Jeff has, not recently, but moved to Belleville and really called it home, which is for him and his wife, a young couple. I can still call you guys young.
Yeah.
I think. Especially Brittany, she's young.
She's 30.
She looks young. She looks great. His wife is a real fucking ball breaker, Chaz, and I don't want to get in trouble with her. So she's firecracker, man, and
she hangs with the boys.
Yeah, so they moved to Belleville.
Doesn't want to get away with anything. It's unbelievable. Unbelievable.
They moved to Belleville. How many years ago, Jeff?
12 years ago. Yeah.
And they've joined fucking committees and bought a beautiful home and a certain mid-century home. Is that what it's called?
Yep.
Been on a documentary about it. So they are. It's a rare thing to see a young couple transplant to Belleville and really fall in love with it and try to make it better. So, which is exciting. And what you're doing by reinvesting into downtown is and I got no skin in the game. I love the fucking town, man.
We want very much so to be. I'm very happy to own a business in the community. Like it's important to me that it's in Belleville and that it's right there in downtown, and that it's a safe place in downtown. Was kind of the goal, is that it's there to be safe and supportive and consistent, and that's part of being a trauma therapist, right? Like, you have to be consistent, you have to be predictable, you have to be what you say you are. Accountability matters. And so I want to be part of the community and hold my water there. I want to pull my weight.
That's cool. It's something that's not talked about in Belleville very often, and downtown's the place where it is the homelessness. Sure. There's a homeless population in Belleville that we don't think about. So anybody who's willing to invest like that in Belleville, downtown, and possibly, reach out to those kind of people, or I don't mean those kind of people, you know what I'm trying to get at though. Yeah. I love it. Yeah. I've become, just a big fan of the community here. So it's cool. And Chaz, I was going to ask you, cause you've mentioned it a couple times. So you do not drink. You've never partaken.
No, I've never had a drink. Yeah, I grew up Catholic, so maybe wine at church.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've never had a drink, never had a drug.
Wow.
Never smoked a cigarette.
Wow. He's a very punk rock, like a straight edge kind of kid.
Yeah, I didn't know there was a name for it when I was doing it, but
yeah, that's cool.
We always had a guy that would come pick you up if you had too much, and I think you met me out for my 21st birthday at Shenanigans, and I think I started a fight with me and my girlfriend at the time were not together, and we were seeing other people, and I ran into her and that other people that night, and it turned into a real big fucking shit show. I think you drove me fucking from Fridays to that Shenanigans.
I was forever hopeful that tonight was the night you weren't going to fight anybody. We'll be okay. I'm here. I can handle it. I know people. We're all right. I'm not drunk. I didn't think that encounter was going to happen. So in my defense, it was not my fault. Anyway, you're not laughing. I guess, yeah, you've heard that before. Chaz, I think this is what you're doing is, I don't know how to articulate it well enough, how awesome it is. And I mean, fuck, are you taking new clients? I might need to meet one of these. I guess we couldn't probably do a thing, but I don't know if that's plenty of room for you.
All right.
Nice.
Are you guys seeing people now to explain how you're operating with the current environment?
So we're pretty committed to telehealth for a while, which is a really interesting thing because if you rewind maybe a year, the discussion of online therapy has always had a little bit of traction as an option. There's apps, there's BetterHelp, there's things like that, once they signed Michael Phelps on to talk about this is great and this is what you need. And so it's always had a little bit of traction, but it's always predominantly been considered just not optimal, right? There's always this kind of the mystical piece of in-person, eye contact, affective shifts, all these different immeasurables were always considered the most important. And then literally in essentially a 24-hour period, everybody has to make the call that we can't be near any other human beings for a while. And so we picked up on telehealth. And this is kind of part of me wanting to be a consistent part of the community is we've also been pretty expressive that we're going to stay that way for a bit. We're not going to, it's not necessarily good therapy to say, you know what, I'll see you here. I'll see you online today, but maybe next week in person, I'll let you know Tuesday. And that kind of inconsistency is really rattling for people. And so we've kind of stayed committed to it. There is the concern of some people don't have privacy or safety to be able to talk online. Now, a lot of those people do go to their car. I've done a lot of therapy in cars where people are just holding their phone with the app and having their, which has been okay. I mean, it's been fine. But we definitely, we're almost exclusively online with some exceptions. And in those exceptions, we are very careful. We are 6 feet apart. We're disinfecting. If a therapist has somebody coming in, the rest of us probably work from home is kind of the rule. Mm-hmm. Like, okay, you got 1 or 2 people coming in today, rather than have more foot traffic that would make people nervous. We'll kind of let that be an isolated incident, clean up after. And it hasn't been bad. It's just you don't necessarily expect, I've been open for a while now, but you don't expect one of your first decisions as a business owner to be that you're going to close your doors.
Well, yeah.
And so we've been fine. It's the business isn't a concern, and I don't consider there to be a real silver lining with something like a pandemic. But I do think there's been people that maybe wouldn't have reached out before that did during this because they knew they wouldn't have to leave home. They could try online. They could, they wouldn't have to come to an office. And so I do think it's opened that door for some people. Because one of the things that was a byproduct of the pandemic was because we're all home and everything's online, there's a lot of people that are reaching out to people they wouldn't normally reach out to because they couldn't get to them. My Buddhist teacher's in Brooklyn. And I'm pretty sure that, the fact that you can meet online was one of the things that was a deciding factor in, this is the guy I want to teach me, so I'm going to reach out to Brooklyn.
Right.
Yep. So it's been good, but we're pretty much online, and anybody that reaches out right now, we would be online unless it was really extenuating circumstances.
No, you said it earlier. I talk to a gal once a month or maybe once every 3 weeks, and she's great, but it is different because it's shifted. It started, I started seeing her before the outbreak or the pandemic, and there's you can't replicate that. You can try and you can still help. We still get through some shit, but you can't replicate that in person.
We're gonna do a survey. I've drafted a few questions and I've kind of been dragging my feet to give it a little more time to set in, but we're going to do a survey just to get some data on how people are feeling about it. We do a lot of check-ins in real time. An important part of therapy should always be checking on the relationship, where the therapist says, how are we doing? Mm-hmm. Is this what you expected? Is this not what you expected? Did you have something real important today? And I started asking other questions and I bulldozed right through it. We try to get a lot of real-time feedback, but what I want to know more than anything is in an anonymous setting where somebody doesn't know that I know they're answering, if I just ask a question like, are you able to get to the kinds of emotional material that you think you would in person? Mm-hmm. If I get feedback from 100 people and 60 of them say that they're hedging on certain topics because they're worried about the lag or something like that, I will have to make a very serious decision about how I want to handle that. I can't have 60% of the people that are using our services think that they're operating at 2/3. I can't do that, and I don't know how I would handle that. But that's the feedback I need to get. I need that data and that information, or I'm not going to be who I say I am.
Well, yeah, it's a tough time, man, and I'm excited for you guys to be. Up and running, and that place to be like Grand fucking Central Station. People coming.
We're killing it. It's been great. Yeah, we're killing it. And everybody, I have so much trust for these people that are with me.
Chaz, I want you to finish, but I wouldn't. I know you more than this podcast and more than the listeners. You're not going to have somebody in there. That's why it's kind of laughable to me to think, but you do need to explain it, that you're not going to have somebody working with you on this that you don't fully fucking trust and almost, to a point love.
Everybody in there is a cleanup hitter.
There you go.
know, everybody in there is absolutely ready. You know, a lot of people reach out to a therapist and they kind of say the equivalent of, I've had a lot of stuff I know I've needed to work on for a while, and it's time that I do that work. You know, and we are game ready for that sentence. That's where we're at, because I just wouldn't bring somebody in there that can't just hold the space, that can't just do the work, get in there and bring a shovel with you. You know, let's just get digging and see what we find. Nice. and learn how to love every part of you. You know, I mean, that's the big goal with a lot of therapy, is these parts of you emerge that maybe you're ashamed of, or that you shut down, or you avoid, or you avert your eyes. And, you know, with a little bit of a light source, you don't avert your eyes from that shadow anymore, right? Like, I mean, it illuminates, and we want to love it. We want to see all of you.
I love it. What I'll put this on the when we post the show notes and share the podcast. It'll release Monday morning. We're recording this on Saturday, and is it okay to put your website on there? Your address and phone number. What's the website again? Just
the website is findyourlightsource.com.
Findyourlightsource.com. I love it, and people can reach out. I'm sure there's on the website, email, contact, all that good stuff.
Everything, yeah.
Chaz, this has been everything and then some, man. I'm really grateful. You know, every time I think about going to see a shrink, excuse me, is that a derogatory term for therapists? I don't know, but
no, I'm not triggered or anything.
I think of Tony and Dr. Melfi,
sure,
from The Sopranos. So, you know, I for some reason I've avoided it for a long time, but then I ended up, like, my personal light sources in my life have been de facto therapists, whether they like it or not, whether it was a pastor at our church or my fucking primary care physician, who I may have not mentioned this on the show yet, but I'm kind of secretly in love with.
You've mentioned it a few times.
Okay, I have. All right. So, Ashley is she's a little Indian goddess, and I can say that, right? But my Ashley's number one. She's my sweet princess number one. But I think Ashley's probably done some therapizing, if that's a word, with me as well. So, and she's actually pushed me to go see. Really, what's helped me is the struggle of being a foster parent and dealing with that secondary trauma, if you will, because it can be brutal. So it's been really helpful for that. But every time she tries, you'll like this, Chaz. Every time she tries to talk about the fucking hard shit, aka Tom Pondoff, it's my exit strategy. And she says, the therapist says, I'll only bring it up as I'm leaving. She calls it the doorknob conversation, right? Have you heard that before?
The 49-minute mark. By the way, did you know Tom's dead?
Yep. See you in a month.
Yep.
So that's my strategy. So that if I ever use your sources, I know I'm not going to have time for. That's not going to fly there. But
no, don't play around.
I think what you're doing is amazing. You've often been a light source for me through my recovery journey, and we've often, you know, I've shot you texts and stuff on the Charlie situation and other thing, you know, foster stuff and recovery stuff. So I know what you can do. You've been fucking my therapist since I was 14, as you said earlier, and
I was real bad at it then.
Well, you've honed in on your skills, man, and keep doing what you're doing. You know, this couldn't have gone any better. You've said so many things. I've never taken this much fucking notes during a podcast that I've done with authors and quotes and shit. I mean, I feel like I was in fucking high school or college again, taking notes here. I can barely read them, but I'll decipher them.
You might actually have to read a book, Chris.
Yeah, figure it out. We're leaving tomorrow morning to head down to Table Rock for a week, and they don't have that Gabor mate on the audio, like the book on tape yet, do they?
I'm sure they do, yeah.
Oh, really? Fuck, I was trying to dodge that.
Oh, you're screwed.
Absolutely. He's got a TED Talk, too, if you only want 18 minutes.
Oh, there you go.
Well, I'll have to check them out, and I'll turn my paper in by Monday mornings.
I appreciate it. He's a sweet man. I've talked to him. He's a very sweet man. He's
awesome.
He's the real deal.
Well, you tell Holly thanks for popping on before the show and introducing herself, and I look forward to meeting her in person.
Yeah, she's awesome.
And unfortunately, or fortunately, however you want to look at it, she didn't never get to meet the old Chris. But it's better just to tell the stories and not actually have to go back and live that. So.
Well, you're doing important work here too. As we close out, I'll say and this goes with you and your kiddo. Talking about all this foster care stuff. When we talk about trauma, we talk resiliency. They talk about risk factors and protective factors. And the number one protective factor for someone is having one safe adult. If a kid has one safe adult, and it doesn't mean mom or dad necessarily, it could be, damn, my 6th grade teacher, Mr. or Mrs. So-and-so always looked out for me. Having a reference of a safe adult, a person that is who they say they are, who doesn't waver from that path, and they can internalize that here and here. That's the number one protective factor for people that have been through some of this hairy shit. So you're doing important work out here too, Pondoff. You're helping a lot of people. People need to hear you. People need to hear, man, there are certain parts of your life that you really have had to traverse that have been really tough, and you're doing it. And it's important that you be out here talking because people need to hear that tough shit doesn't go away. It's okay to have it with you. It's okay every now and then if you're dragging that body behind you. That's all right. Sometimes you'll put it down. Sometimes you'll pick it up, but it's there. So, we appreciate having you out here too.
Well, thanks, Chaz, and for everything you said throughout this podcast, man. I love you just as much, and have always you've always been my big brother. There's no question, and Tommy P loved you too, man. He would always have to say, Chazzy, what the fuck are we gonna do about him? And he was saying that to you when you were 18. So I appreciate you trying to pick up where he left off, and it's something I'll never forget, man. And,
yeah, I'm not going anywhere.
And he may not have been the best referee on the ice, but he's the only guy that could give a guy 2 and 10 and have the guy laughing his ass off on the way to the penalty box.
Which is a very therapeutic move. I admire that move.
Hey, I think one time. Our buddy Jeremy Gwynn put somebody through the fucking plexiglass into the parking lot, and Tommy P told Jeremy Gwynn's old man, a loudmouth, guy,
Bill,
God bless him. Hey, Bill was like, "What'd you call that for?" He's like, "Bill." He goes, "The guy's fucking twitching." He goes, "The next time, tell Jeremy to make me to not do it behind my back, and I won't call it." He goes, "I wasn't going to call it until the guy started twitching."
He had a seizure.
I had to do something, but man, I appreciate you, and I just look back at those memories, and I do smile, man. And they definitely evolved TP, but where you were throughout a lot. I look back at some of those stories like, man, I really fucked that up, but Chaz would be there to to tough love it or help me through it. And I was super excited all week. I couldn't wait to get to Saturday to do this. And
thank you. I'm glad. Thanks for having me. You too, Jeff. Good to meet you.
Yeah, man. You too. We'll have to get some coffee when it's safe down at Balance or something.
Wait.
Yeah, absolutely. If I'm invited, I'd love to join you guys as soon as we get through
You're absolutely invited
to the other side of this pandemic. No. But Chaz, thanks again. Thanks for sharing your wisdom, your knowledge, your humor. I really appreciate your insight to your spirituality and Buddhism. I think there's some real I hate to keep saying this term, but light sources for people that will connect with, and the higher power turning my life over, because I can't do it all on my own, is what's probably saved my life, as you mentioned at the beginning of the show. So I love you, and thank you so much. And we'll have to do this again, but let's get together soon, brother.
Yeah, love you, brother.
All right, guys. Amen. And as always, let us pray.
If you're struggling or know someone that is, please have them check out our podcast and reach out to Chris or me. We want to listen, and we're super eager to help. Pondoff's Anonymous is Chris Pondoff and produced by me, Jeff Allen. Our music is Anti-Hero by McCall and Gentle Waters by Wild Wonder. For more information, visit pondoffsanonymous.com. Find us on Facebook and Instagram.